Introduction. Whether you want to put that big trophy buck on your wall, or you want to enjoy some delicious lean meat, you have decided to become a hunter. Not just any hunter, but a bow hunter. There are many things that need to be considered to become a good hunter. Using this guide, you will learn many of the tricks that I have accumulated over 2 decades of archery and hunting. It is a complete guide to hunt down that deer and bring it to the dinner plate. Part 1. Getting ready. So you think you are ready to just pick up a bow and go trudging into the woods? Well, you would be sorely mistaken. Before you even begin to think about the trophy, you need to realize that what we are after as hunters is in fact a living, breathing creature. We need to keep this in mind as hunters to make sure that the kill is as swift and as painless as possible for the animal. Aside from the obvious dubious amounts of practice, a good hunter has a full understanding of the equipment they use in a hunt. Chapter 1. Know your weapons. Compound bows or recurves. This is by far the most important part of hunting, because without it, there is no way of you being able to harvest a deer. I mean, you could go old school with a rock, but it is not exactly fast, practical, or legal. So with this in mind, we will be looking at the bow. Now you need to understand that there are hundreds of different bows available for purchase by many manufacturers. Different styles are available with their own unique features. So we are not here all day going over them. We will just go over the generalization of the bows. Regardless of any bow that you use, a hunter needs to know how many drawing pounds the bow is adjusted to. Draw poundage is the amount of tension the strings are pulling, and how many pounds of force that arrow is going to hit the deer with. While the minimum legal draw poundage to be eligible to hunt is 40 pounds, it is recommended for the average adult to be between 55 to 65 pounds. It is advised because that much draw force is enough for the arrow to cleanly pass through. Of course, young hunters and the early teens can only muster so much. Choose a draw poundage that you are most comfortable with. Now that we mentioned before, we will be going over the generalization of the bow, and usually there are only 2 main styles that are discussed. The first we will be talking about is the iconic style that is often shown in movies and is used in the Olympics. This is what we call a recurve bow. The simplistic design has been around, dating as far back as the Mesolithic period, for you interested in history. Its design has not changed in over 8,000 years because it works. The mechanics of it are simple. The limbs are made from multiple layers of material, fiberglass, carbon, or wood. The center section of the bow, called the riser, is separate and is constructed from various materials like carbon or aluminum. We call it the riser because the limbs on either side of the center will bend due to the stress of the string. Modern manufacturers have applied greater mass to the old style to ensure stability. Stability in its handling increases the accuracy of shooters. From the limbs, the string is attached, tightened to adjust the draw poundage. Recurves nowadays have become less used in the hunting setting due to lower accuracies compared to more advanced bows that have become readily available. There are still many great hunters that make use of the old design. About 50 years ago, manufacturers came up with a brand new design to the classic bow. This new update has become known now as a compound bow. Unlike its predecessor, the compound bow uses a series of cables and pulley systems at either end of the shaft. The pulley/cam system grants the shooter a mechanical advantage, granting the limbs of the bow to be stiffer than those seen in a recurve bow. With this rigidity, the compound bow becomes more energy efficient because less energy dissipates with the movement of the limbs. High rigidity is coupled with a more modern construction of the limbs, which bolsters accuracy by reducing the sensitivity to change in weather effects like temperature and humidity, which can be altered in older recurve bows. The design of the pulley and cam system also grants the benefit of what is called let-off. The way this works is, as the string is drawn back, the pulleys rotate as well. Since the pulleys are eccentric, their effective radius changes as they rotate. An inner cam track connected mechanically to the limbs, or opposite cam, and an outer cam track that runs through the bowstring work together as it is drawn. With the string drawn, ratio of the bowstring payout, and limb weight reduction, the let-off itself is the result of cams having passed center and approached something like the cams locking the string in place. So this sounds like a lot of high-tech talk with little meaning. But it is important to know it, or at least keep it in mind. Translating that to someone without a master's in mechanical engineering is that the cams allow more draw poundage without you as the shooter feeling the strain. Because the cams essentially lock the string in place at full draw, it reduces the tension on the shooter and bolsters accuracy. In modern hunting, most hunters do prefer the compound bow due to this accuracy and power advantage. But there are still those who use the traditional recurve bow. Even with the technological advantage, it all comes down to the preference of the shooter and the training. As a hunter, I have been using a compound bow since I was 5 years old, so my preference is the compound because I'm used to it. Someone with the same length of practice with a recurve would be most likely just as proficient in using a recurve as I am using a compound. It is not the bow that makes the hunter, it is the archer. Fletching, shaft, and broadheads. The bow is only half of the equation when it comes to hunting. Just like with a gun, it needs ammunition. Otherwise, all you have is a big stick. Sure, you could beat the deer over the head, but good luck getting that close. Now, for the reasonable hunters, we have arrows. A typical arrow used in hunting has 3 major components that make up our ammunition. They are the fletching, the shaft, and finally, the broadhead. With all the different manufacturers possible, there are literally thousands of different combinations possible. Again, it is all about preference. But here is a bit of insight. Again, the bow is only half of the equation, the other being the arrow. A typical arrow used in hunting has 3 major components to it: the fletching, the shaft, and the broadheads. With the first 2, there are several materials available for hunters to choose from, and each have their own benefits to them. Meanwhile, the broadheads, or arrowheads, are typically made out of stainless steel, but come in many varieties. Like with the bow, it is all about preference. Starting off with the fletching, this is the fins, or veins of the arrow, each of which are referred to as a fletch. Commonly, the fletching consists of 3 half feathers of matching size and material found at the rear of the arrow, and are equally spaced around its circumference. History has shown that 4 have been used, but more modern hunters use the 3. Back in the past, these feathers were used from bird feathers, with an adhesive and silk thread. In our current era, common adhesives make that no longer necessary. Also, the material of the fletch has changed. Feathers have been opted out for plastics because they are less likely to sustain major damage over constant use. Synthetic feathers can still be found on the back of arrows as well, but it is the preference of the hunter. The fletching acts as a stabilizer for the arrow and accentuates its aerodynamics. Feathers impart a natural spin on the arrow due to the rough and smooth sides of a feather and the natural curve of its structure, which is determined by what part of the wing the feather came from. Modern plastic vanes are placed on the arrow at a slight angle to create the same effect. Stability to the projectile ensures that it does not tumble during a flight. It keeps the arrow flying fast to ensure it hits the target with high speed and accuracy. Application of a fletching can be done by yourself or a professional. Now, to the main body of our structure. The shaft is the primary element of the arrow to which everything else are attached to. In the past, the shafts have been made from lightweight woods or bamboo reeds in the East. Modern shafts use more reinforced materials like aluminum or carbon fibers. The stiffness of the shaft, known as the spine, refers to how little the shaft bends when compressed. An arrow that bends less is said to have more spine to it, a bit different from the human spine. Traditional bows have arrows that have less spine due to the fact that it has to flex when shot. If you would look at video footage of traditional bows being shot in slow motion, the arrows will flex as they travel to the target. In modern bows, a shaft with more spine is preferred due to the fact that it does not need to flex around the bow when shot, as modern designs have what is called center shot, which the arrow passes through the central vertical axis of the bow riser. Higher draw poundage bows require a stiffer shaft to give the correct amount of flex when shot. Otherwise, the arrow would flex too much and compromise the aerodynamics. Another thing to be considered is the weight of the arrow shaft. They are measured in grains per inch, meaning for every inch of the shaft, it shall only weigh so many grains. For example, a shaft that has 30 inches of length and a grains per inch of 10 has a weight of 300 grains, or about 19.5 grams. The weight of the arrow is important because it affects the aerodynamics and the impact when it hits the animal. A heavier arrow will be slower, but will hit the target with more force, whereas a lighter arrow flies faster, but will have less power behind it. We will be ending at the beginning, of the arrow at least. At the tip of the arrow, we have what is called the broadhead. Before we begin this discussion, I should note that it is not advised to practice shooting with the actual broadheads. The arrow tips are made out of a sharp and durable stainless steel, which will severely damage the practice targets and can result in injury. There was an acquaintance who attempted to draw an arrow from a target, and the arrow had a broadhead. When he pulled it out, the blade sliced open his calf, just missing the femoral artery. So it is safety first when practicing. The use of a field tip or practice head is recommended. Broadheads come in a variety of styles and shapes, each having a slight variation to a basic design, all with one goal in mind. They are meant to cut into the hide and inflict as much damage as possible. Because there are so many, we will be generalizing like we did with the bow. The two major parts I would like to discuss are fixed heads and mechanical. Fixed blades are a style that most people think of when they hear the word broadhead. The arrowhead is made up of 2 to 4 blades arranged in a symmetrical manner around the center point of the shaft. Fixed blades are structurally sturdy and are usually one solid piece, although some have detachable blades. If it is the latter, make sure the blades are fastened securely before use. On the other hand, there are arrowheads known as mechanical broadheads, which behave a bit differently compared to their fixed counterparts. When the tip of the arrow strikes the target, the force drives 2 to 3 blades to unfurl and open to cut through. Blades tend to be longer than fixed, allowing for a greater cutting diameter. Since the blades are folded against the shaft before hitting the target, it allows for a better sense of aerodynamics. However, there have been cases that the blades will open up prematurely, or not at all, which can inhibit the damage done. Sights and stabilizers. While these pieces of equipment are found more often on a compound bow, some recurves do make use of them, and unlike the parts that we went over before, they are not necessary. However, it makes the shot a lot easier as they bolster accuracy. We as hunters want to be as accurate as possible because it ensures a successful kill when we do take the shot. Like what we have went over before, there are many variants from just as many manufacturers, so I will not be going over which is the best, but an overall generalization of the equipment. Sights. They make aiming so much easier compared to the naked eye. Just like with a gun, it helps you, as the hunter, target a specific location on the body of the target and hit in a general vicinity of where you wanted to shoot, off target, usually within an inch. Usually a sight on a bow has a fluorescent pin, which helps it stand out against the dark fur of the white-tailed deer. Some sights can be equipped with a lens to help hunters zoom in on the designated area that they want to shoot. It also helps those who have poor eyesight, like some older hunters. Pins can be a singular one that is adjustable to meet the desired distance a hunter wishes to shoot at, or there are several pins designated for different yardages. There are some sights that are able to pivot like a pendulum to adjust for the distance between the hunter and the target. The last sight has to be used in a tree stand to make it work. Of course, none of these sights will mean anything without practice. A good hunter has to practice with the sight and adjust it so they can shoot accurately, consistently. Stabilizers, on the other hand, offer steadiness when shooting. It is mounted to the riser back by screwing a thread through an accessory hole located below where the hunter grips the bow. They absorb vibrations in the bow when it is shot, which reduces the shock the hunter feels in their hand. It makes the bow quieter, which is a big thing when it comes to hunting. You do not want to alarm the deer as the arrow is flying toward them. Disaster can ensue. Stabilizers also keep the bow balanced by adding weight. Weight down low encourages the bow to stand straight, which is critical to accuracy. It also helps combat what is known as bow torque. When an archer shoots their bow, there is a reactive force on them, which wants them to break the lock on their wrist. This torque can send the arrow sailing in a much different path than originally intended. Neither of these are needed to properly hunt, but they make the accuracy of the hunter much more consistent. The better the shooter, the better chance the hunter has to making a successful and clean kill.